morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to our next session here, designed for transitioning teachers who are exploring instructional design. We've got some guest speakers here today, Angela and Megan, who are ready to share their knowledge and help you all in your journey. So I'm going to go ahead and turn over the mic here for intros.
Thanks, Abby. My name is Angie, and I'm the Senior Manager of Education and Training for the Fire Safety Research Institute, a part of UL Research Institutes. And it's my pleasure to introduce Meghan Maloney. She's a member of the instructional design team. She works on designing online training and instructional materials for the fire service in her role with FSRI. Meghan graduated from the University of Maryland in 2015 with a BA in Hearing and Speech Science. And in 2017, she completed her master's in education in curriculum and instruction. She spent the first 6 years of her career as a middle school science teacher before transitioning into instructional design in 2022. And that's when I had the pleasure of meeting her. I had historically hired individuals with a more traditional instructional design background, but when I interviewed Meghan, my eyes were open to the value that a classroom teacher could bring to our team. It's the best decision I've made in my 20 plus years of hiring in this field. Meghan's grown as an instructional designer and as a leader in her time with us. She is the perfect example of how to successfully make the transition from the classroom to instructional design. So without any further ado, here's Meghan to share her story and some advice for others looking to make this leap.
Oh, thanks so much. You make me tear up here before I get started. But I really appreciate the introduction, and I'm very excited to talk with you all today who are in this session, and hopefully to inspire you to consider a role in instructional design. Before we get into it, though, I just want to commend all of you for taking this step. I know from personal experience that being a teacher can be hard. But I also know that making the decision to prioritize yourself and leave the classroom can sometimes be even harder. So in case you haven't heard it from anyone today, I'm very proud of you, and I'm excited for you and the next steps in your journey. So let's go ahead and get started. So my goal today is to empower you to know and own your skills as a teacher, which you can then use to propel you into a new career. So I'm sure that you've heard from other people, or maybe you've even thought to yourself, I can't do that. I'm just a teacher. And just a teacher in quotation marks, huge, right? Because I want to challenge that mindset and prove to you that you do have the skills to be successful outside of the classroom. We're going to start by discussing what a career in instructional design looks like, and then move into what skills that you have that can apply to instructional design. And then finally, we're going to see how those skills can translate, and also talk about some ways that you can apply that on a resume or in an interview as well. So I encourage you to ask questions. I know we have a Q&A and a chat set up that our hosts and Angie and Abby are going to be helping us monitor. But we will take a look at that and answer them either throughout the presentation or at the end. So I really want to help you make the most out of this presentation. I'd like to start by finding out where you are in your current career. So if you scan this QR code, you should pop up to a poll, which, if you wouldn't mind picking between if you are a teacher who is considering transitioning, if you are a teacher actively in the job market, if you are a successfully transitioned teacher, or you are a other L&D professional. This will give us an idea of who is in the room. Great. So it looks like we have some people who are considering transitioning and actively in the job market. So this is a great presentation for you, as well as those teachers who are successfully transitioned, including myself. It's really on us to advocate for teachers in the roles that we are in now. So as you're listening to the presentation, I want you to think about how what I'm sharing with you, you can go and advocate to other hiring managers to add teachers to your team as well. Don't close that tab because we're going to have one more thing a little later in the presentation, so you can just leave that open for later. So one thing I've learned in instructional design is that career paths, especially here, are never linear. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't spend my middle school years dreaming of being an instructional designer. In fact, I don't even think I knew what instructional designer was. However, the paths that led us here influence who we are today. So a little bit more about me. Like I said, my name is Megan. And after I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I actually began my career as a park ranger. And I wore the flat hat for a few years and worked at various national parks across the country designing education programs. It was a really fun job and a totally unique experience. And I got a lot of experience designing education programs for the first time right out of college. But what I realized I was missing was that connection to my audience, because people would come and they'd listen to my presentation for an hour, but you're visiting a national park, you're traveling, they would go away. And I wanted that connection. My mom was a teacher, so it was kind of a natural step for me to continue my passion of education. And I went back to school to get my master's degree in curriculum and instruction. Where I am in Maryland, there is a 1-year master's and teaching certificate program. So that was a long year. That was a hard year, but I ended up with both a master's degree and a teaching certificate at the end of it, and was able to find a job as a middle school science teacher, where I was for 6 years. I taught chemistry, I taught physical science, I taught biology, I taught environmental science, I taught engineering, I wrote curriculum, I led a bunch of clubs, I worked on a leadership team. Is any of this sounding familiar to you guys as teachers? Right? We're not just teachers. And I see the clap, so yes. I had a great time, but ultimately it led to burnout, a lot of it, and other factors that we don't really need to get into, but it led me to the desire for a change. I wanted to continue to use my passion for education, and even science education for that matter, but I knew that the classroom was not the right place for me. So I began the job search, which took me quite a few months, and that is where I landed my role as an instructional designer, working with Angie at Fire Safety Research Institute, or FSRI, as I will call it throughout the presentation. This role is really unique. It combines both my education passion as well as my science education passion, which is cool, to take research outputs that our team puts out and translates them into online trainings for the fire service. So even though my career path is not straight and who knows what comes next, every step along the way has given me skills that have helped me be successful here. So no, I was never just a teacher. So what does an instructional designer do? First and foremost, we collaborate with content SMEs, which stands for subject matter experts, probably an acronym you've seen a lot if you've been in the job search, and other team members to identify training needs and design that training to meet learning objectives. So we design and develop that content. Sometimes that's a full online course. Sometimes that's a job aid. Sometimes that's a video. We work, again, with those SMEs and other team members and our external stakeholders to figure out what that training need is and create it. Our content SMEs, they are advocates for whatever content we are trying to teach. My researchers, they're advocating for the research. I am advocating for the learner and for education best practices. So in my role, it is my responsibility to know the education research field and to make sure that I am advocating for what the learner would benefit from. So for example, our researchers, they put out 900-page reports. I'm not going to take that 900-page report and just give it to a member of the fire service. A firefighter does not have the time to read a 900-page report. In fact, I'm probably not even going to create a 1 or 2 hour training course for them, because I know them and I know that more than likely their training is 5 to 10 minutes or less. So I'm going to advocate that we take that research report and we turn it into micro lessons. And so the researcher would say, well, this is the content we need. And I would say, okay, here's how we do it. So an advocacy and a strong knowledge and passion for the best practices is important. I'd like to put the disclaimer, though, that for instructional design, responsibilities can vary greatly from role to role. And so it's very important that you understand the role that you are applying for or interviewing for, because sometimes it might be purely design or purely development. Sometimes you might have a lot of project management responsibilities. Sometimes you may have none. And so definitely making sure that you know what the role is important. A lot of times in interviews, when I'm interviewing people will ask, what is my typical day look like? And I have a hard time answering this question, because as a instructional designer, my role varies greatly depending on which point of the project I'm in. So a little tip here for you: if you're in an interview and you want to ask that question, I encourage you to ask what your typical week looks like instead. You're going to get a much more holistic approach and understanding of the full role, instead of just a random day that the hiring official decides to describe to you. As an instructional designer, I've split my responsibilities into 2 categories. We have project management and content development. I also have some people leader responsibilities and other things pertaining to my role, but we'll break it up into these 2 for the sake of this. For project management, this means I'm creating project briefs. I'm having project meetings. I am meeting with my subject matter experts or my external stakeholders. I'm using project management tools and doing other duties as assigned, as we all have. This is about 40% of my time. And then in the other 60% is where I really get to let my creativity shine to create, edit, review, and develop the content that we put out. I'm going to talk through what that process looks like in my content development through the ADDIE model. So you may have heard of the ADDIE model before if you are in instructional design. It is an instructional design process that gives us the structured framework to create learning outputs that are effective. So in my role, we use the ADDIE model. This isn't the only model process that you could use, and other companies definitely use different ones. But this is the one that I'm going to focus on, just because it gives me a chance to talk about every part of my job. While I'm doing this, I want you to start to think about how it relates to what you do in the classroom, because I think you'll start to hear and think of some examples of yourself, how you do this already. So the ADDIE model, or A, starts with the analysis phase. And this is where you identify the problem that needs to be solved and determine the effective output. So this might be an online course, or this might be a job aid. This might be a video, like I was saying before. But during this phase is when you're starting to figure that out. There is a lot of data collection that happens. You are talking to your content subject matter experts. You're talking to your learners, your external stakeholders, and you're trying to get a picture for what this training output looks like. You're also starting to think about how you're going to evaluate the learner and how you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of this training, which is just as important as creating the training itself. When you leave this phase, you are going to have a defined learning objective and project outcome. Lots of people want to jump right into the development of a project. But in my opinion, this is where the meat of that project actually is. This is where you make sure that you're on the same page, so that your SME doesn't think that you are designing a 6-hour course and you're actually only designing a 3-minute video. And this is where you make sure that you have leveled those expectations and that you are meeting the learner's need. Next, you're going to come into the design phase. And this phase is when you actually translate all the information that you collected in your analysis phase and create that learning design plan. And that plan is not just limited to a project plan, content outline, and a storyboard and prototype. At this phase, like with all of our phases, we're going to engage the project team for feedback and making sure we're always coming back to the original agreed upon learning objectives. Next, you're actually going to bring your ideas to life in the development phase. So here is where you're actually using your tools to design that online training. You are also going to be getting feedback from depending on your company's review process, whoever you need to get feedback to, because at the end of this development phase is when your project or that output is ready to go. So never develop anything in a silo. You're always engaging people to making sure that it's meeting those agreed upon objectives. This is the implementation phase, and that's the actually delivery of the output. So you're printing your flyers, you're sending your digital content, you're publishing to your LMS, and you're beginning to collect that data so that you can end with an evaluation phase. So evaluating the training is not just about whether the student or the learner met the objectives. Of course, that's very important, but we also want to know, was it effective for them? What did it make them feel? Did they feel like it was a waste of time, even if they did meet the learning objectives? And so throughout this process, you're making sure that you're including that, whether it's an assessment, probably important, or a course evaluation or other means of feedback. So that way you can edit the learning output that you just did, or you can use that information to start the next process over again. So it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. In instructional design, these processes can take months, in fact. Quite a shock for me when I first started is that projects take more than one class period, because that's how much I had to plan most of my lessons before. And now we're working on projects that are taking months. But you do this process already. I want you to think about it. You analyze your students' needs. You think about what a student with an IEP needs, or what differentiated lesson you can provide your student. You design that lesson, then you develop it, and you create your Google slideshow, or if you're a science teacher, you're creating the lab and you're setting it up and you're implementing it. And then you're taking that information from your students, whether it's a formal assessment or an exit card, or you're just looking out and seeing, hey, are they paying attention or are they asleep and on their phones? And you're using that information to drive the next lesson that you do, or the next period even. So you make a lot of these decisions, and you do a lot of this probably without even thinking about it. And now we're going to start putting a name to it, so that when you go and apply to a role as an instructional designer, you can say, yeah, I analyze, I design, I develop, I implement, and I evaluate, because you do. One of the overwhelming things that a person can see when they're looking at a job description for instructional design is all of the tools that are there. I know we at our company really feel that we can teach tools, but I can't teach passion and I can't teach that knowledge. So our company looks at that. But there's definitely companies who want you to have a minimum knowledge of different content authoring, designing, LMSs, business tools, and software. So I just wanted to highlight a few of them so you can think about upskilling if that's something that you choose to do. Probably the biggest ones are the content authoring tools. You have Articulate Storyline and Adobe Captivate. This is how you design those interactive online trainings that people take. You have content designing, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and Canva. Depending on your company, you may have teams that support this, but I've always found that having this basic knowledge of that can help me make a little edit to a icon or something without having to send it through my graphic design team. There's also learning management systems such as Canvas, Cornerstone, and Smarter U. So having a basic understanding of how a learning management system works may be important. Business tools as well, such as Monday.com and Asana, which are project management tools, get used very widely, as well as Microsoft Office Suite, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. And last but not least, you have Camtasia and Premiere Pro, which are some video software. So this might help you if you're looking at a job description and you see something called Monday.com, and you're like, what's that? Well, it's a business tool for project management and things like that. So I would encourage you to look at the job description and see if this is even something you need to upskill in before you start doing that. I would not advise you to spend thousands of dollars getting certifications and trainings, because every role is different. You can have a lot of free upskilling on YouTube or free trials from different things. And I would just think about it about your job search, if how much money you're willing to invest in that role. Now, if there's a role that you really, really want, do it. I get it. But I'm just saying to think about before you start jumping into big courses. All right, I'm going to stop there because we're going to kind of transition into more resume stuff. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, I see that Gina said that she do not use authoring tools. So there's an example of a role. Yeah, if someone had spent a lot of money on content authoring, they might not have needed it in the role. So, all right. So I just want to give you a kind of a quick reality check here. Remember that most people think of you as just a teacher and have no idea what you do on a daily basis. And it is your job to explain how your skills translate and are valuable. It is your responsibility to do that. As a hiring official who was a teacher, I can look at a teacher's resume, and if they say teacher, I know in my head all of this stuff that they have done. But it is not on me or on other hiring officials to know that. It is on you to explain that well. So another quick little check-in for this. Here we go. In short phrase form, what are some tasks that you do every day as a teacher? So like teach lessons, work in a PLC, and feel free to submit a few so we can get some ideas here before we talk about translating that on a resume. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move forward into the next part here, where we're going to actually take some roles that you do as a teacher and break them down into what you might put on a resume instead. So as a teacher, you might work in a PLC or a professional learning community. Sorry if that word is not as open in the teacher world as it used to be, but a PLC. You could say that, but I'd be like, as a hiring official who wasn't a teacher, I'd be like, what the heck? I don't know what that means. And so instead, consider saying things like collaborate with cross-curricular teams or synthesize extensive content into learning modules, right? You have now taken this very teacher-esque thing and you have shown what you could do in a role as a corporate for instructional design. You plan field trips. You don't just plan field trips. You manage outside vendors to deliver scope of works on time and within budget. That's not a lie. That is just translating what you do into words that people, our hiring officials, would understand. You talk to parents and admin. You facilitate effective communication with stakeholders to achieve common goals. Or you lead team meetings. You facilitate monthly meetings with team members to review progress and determine common goals. None of this is a lie. This is just, again, translating what you do into something a hiring official could understand. For content development, you design lessons and activities. You also design compelling learning content, incorporating e-learning tools to increase engagement. You deliver lessons. Well, you deliver 5 instructor-led classroom sessions per day using appropriate methodologies for the audience. So the reason I put 5 in here is just to highlight that it is important when you can to give time or number amounts to things. Because if you just say deliver instructor-led lessons, I'm like, okay, well, how many? Is it 1 per day? Is it 1 per month? Is it 1 per year? And so that helps to really refine and have the hiring official understand exactly what you're doing. You probably differentiate lessons, and you anticipate barriers for learners and develop differentiated interventions and solutions to guarantee optimal learning. You also adjust lessons based on feedback. And then you collect and analyze data on learner engagement and performance and use the data to make informed changes on future content. I see a question in the chat about any tips to add metrics in a meaningful way and how to deal with it if you no longer have access to data from previous roles. That's a great question. And I would encourage you for the second part about data, that it doesn't need to be exact, right? Like if you taught 251 students versus 261 students, that's okay. Like to me, if you say approximately 200 students or at least 200 students, that's okay. Or you increased at least 15% for your data. So I'm not advocating fluffing the data, but I am saying that it's okay to be approximate with your data. So other ways that you could add metrics, just adding that number of students, that's important. Add if you saw a increase in student achievement, that percentage. I went from 0% students with A's to 70% students with A's. Yes, keep it generic, exactly. Also, you could talk about the number of teachers that you work with. You're on a PLC or a project team of 10 teachers, right? So that's going to be important. We can definitely, and I don't mind helping you guys wordsmith your resume. My information is going to be at the end. So we can definitely talk about that more, and I'd totally be down to help you look through your resume as well. Did that answer your question, Sarah, or do you have any others? Perfect. All right, just 4 more examples before we talk about interviews. Something that's very common that you mentor student teachers or have student teachers. That's a huge deal. You supervise the development of future educators. You're monitoring their progress. You're setting realistic goals, and you're providing timely and constructive feedback. That's actually not something that I have found is offered to a lot of people in some roles. And so having that, it's huge. Don't sell yourself short. You may have also had the opportunity to lead professional development. So you've trained and supported professionals, and you've become a subject matter expert in whatever you're teaching, instructional technology or, science curriculum. Maybe you were a member of the leadership team. And so you served on that 16-person leadership team. You worked together to problem solve, and you improved the work environment and learner achievement. And you would also participate in professional development, which is important because that shows your commitment to upskilling to ensure your skills are relevant and keeping up with industry standards and best practices. So you may be looking at this and being like, okay, she translated it. Where did she get all these things from? And I didn't just make them up, actually, from my head. I mean, maybe a little bit, but a job description is so important for you and for your job search. And in the job description, which it might be a little bit hard to see, I just took this from LinkedIn. So if you scroll down in this one, this was from last week, it was a TikTok shop instructional designer. And it has responsibilities right in here. And I pulled a lot of my wording from job descriptions, not just one, but from multiple through there. So you can see collaborate with subject matter experts to understand complex technical concepts, like collaborate right there. Design and deliver instructor-led training sessions. Utilize multimedia tools. Conduct needs assessments. All of this is important, and it is right here. The hiring official is telling you what they want you to put out. They want to see on your resume. So take a look. I know that there is a big push in a lot of communities, and I heard this a lot in my job search, that every single job you should create a new resume for, and you should tailor your resume to that job. And for me, that was absolutely not feasible. On LinkedIn, Indeed, make it easy enough to apply for hundreds of jobs per day. Click, click, click. I was also a full-time teacher and, trying to do this transition. I would encourage you to make sure that the job is tailored to the job type that you are applying for. So an example of that, if you are applying for a role as an instructional designer where you are designing only online content, make sure that your resume is talking about your skills designing online content. And you probably don't even need to mention that you did instructor-led sessions, because that's not going to be relevant to the role. So when I was applying, I had a resume that was for purely online instructional design. I also had a resume that was for training roles. So if I was doing online training or in-person training, that was a resume. So for every single one, I was not creating a new resume. Maybe that's something that you have the time to do, but I know I didn't. But I would not do one generic resume that I'm just sending to every single company. Would definitely try to specify it a little bit more. If there's a role that you see that you know you really want, take the time to do that resume then. So Abby put in the chat here, to get past those, resume scanners, you want to make sure you use the keywords that are in the job description. And you can use the same resume and make minor edits as well. And I agree. Also, when you make it past that, the hiring official is going to look at your resume. And so you don't want to just put words in there. You want to put meaningful words for sure. So a few interview tips here that we can talk about, because I know for me, interviewing, this was the first time I had really interviewed, because teacher interviews are very different. They come to your classroom, they see what you could do, and then they offer you the job, right? Or not. So first and foremost is to be a storyteller. So don't just say you can do something, but tell me how you can do it. I want to hear from you, not just that you taught professional development, right? But I want to hear how somebody came to you and asked you to teach professional development, and then how successful it was, and how you felt from it, and how those skills are going to translate into the role that you have, and things you've learned from it, right? I'm not saying talk for hours and hours, but don't just give me yes, no. If I say, so tell me about your role in instructional, or how you are, I'm thinking a bad question. Tell me about leading a classroom session. I just don't want you to say, well, I did it, right? You want to keep it concise, but you want to engage me. I'm going to remember you then if I hear about your stories, or I hear about your successes, or I hear about how you overcame a challenge. I'm going to remember it. And that's help move you along when we're interviewing multiple people. One thing, you also want to share your passion and excitement. Enthusiasm, gosh, enthusiasm is contagious, and be sure to pass it on. But one thing I would caution you on is to avoid trauma dumping about teaching. So we know that teaching is tough, and we know that teaching is hard. You and I know that, but the hiring official doesn't necessarily need to know every single reason why you are leaving teaching and why it is so bad, or whatever experience that you're having. Focusing on why you're excited for the next one is going to be really, really important. Unfortunately, I'm a huge advocate for teachers. Like we talked about at the beginning, we have a lot of people coming through and applying for our roles that are teachers, and I give them a chance. But I did have an interview one time, and I said, "So why did you apply for this role?" And they just dumped all of the trauma for like 15 minutes on me. And it felt like a therapy session and not an interview. And ultimately, I didn't get to know their skills enough. So definitely be wary of this. So with the interview, ensure that your skills match your resume. So if you put something on your resume, be sure that you can talk to it, that you are looking at that and you aren't just putting proficient in storyline, but you can talk to how you are proficient in storyline. Maybe you have an example, things like that. You don't just want to put something on to get it past that hiring official or the resume scanner, and then you can't actually speak to it in an interview, because it's immediately going to lessen your credibility. And last but not least, be sure to know the role. So be prepared to talk about relevant job experience to the job that you're applying. Similar to that resume conversation before, if you are applying to an in-person training role, then make sure that your experience is in person and is training experience. If you're applying to a role that is solely online training, make sure that you're ready to speak to that training too. More than that, also know the interviewer. LinkedIn is an amazing tool. Go on there, connect with your interviewer before. Make sure that you have something that you can immediately connect to. Maybe you went to the same college. Maybe you were a teacher and they were a teacher in their past life, and boom, you have an instant connection. I have found that when I'm interviewing people, the ones that are the most memorable to me are the conversations, the ones that just flow, and I feel like I get to know them and get to know their organic way. And as a interviewee, a lot of that comes from whether you're prepared or not just the role. Know the company, so make sure that you're doing the research of the company too. We had a person who interviewed for the role and did not know that we were designing online trainings for the fire service, and just assumed that instructional design meant that we were doing HR training, and came ready to talk about HR training. And so make sure that you know that company, understand what we do. It's just a quick Google search, right? And don't make assumptions about things that you don't understand. And last but not least, be ready to ask questions. Not only are they interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. I know in such a tough job market, it can feel like you're just ready for anyone to offer you a job. And I hear that, but be prepared to ask them questions too, because a role with something that you absolutely despise or don't feel like you would be successful with. So just to end, before we get into Q&A, you are not just a teacher, okay? You are a teacher, and I'm excited for you and your career. I'm proud of you and your career, and I think that you are going to be great at whatever next steps that you do. And so make sure that you believe in yourself and you advocate for yourself in a way that's going to be respected and received by the corporate world, because it's a different world. But we can fight in it, and I believe in you. So this is my information, and I have left some time for us to talk and answer questions. Also, I know we have quite a few people who've already transitioned. So if you'd like to talk about how to advocate for teachers, I think that would be another great place to start, because it really does take the people in the roles and in the companies to advocate as well. So Sarah had a question, and Abby said, caveat to that, don't make a connection request, just look at their profile for talking points. That's a good point. I think depending on where you are in the interview process, that can be definitely looking at their profile for talking points is important. And definitely don't connect with somebody without some sort of message, right? Like you just click everybody in the company to connect. No, connect with the recruiter, and that way they can see your experience, and then maybe you connect with people in the future. Abby said, do your homework and research the company. It matters. Agreed, 100%. Oh, sorry, Sarah, I missed this one. When you connect on LinkedIn with somebody you're applying to, should you seek out the recruiters or HR or just anyone for a plausible connection? So I would say to stick with the recruiters or HR first, and then maybe somebody who is interviewing you second, because most companies will send an email and be like, here's who you're interviewing with. And then that connection can be good to see and to learn about them. A lot of the companies that you're applying to are really big, and just making a connection with somebody in a different division is not going to automatically mean that they're going to reach out to the HR person and reach out to the recruiter and say that you have this person that is applying, right? And that doesn't really have as much, it can, but it doesn't always have as much pull over that you think. So just randomly connecting with people is not going to be as impactful as meaningful connections with people.
I also have a lot of thoughts on that. I've researched strategies. If anyone wants to talk about that networking game, I know we're coming up on that, but random requests don't work. It comes across as desperation, and that's the last thing you want when it's your dream job and all you want to do is message people. And there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and if you make that step, it may not end up real well for you, because a lot of people get those asks like, oh, I connected with you, okay, now I need you to tell them I'm applying for this job. Don't do that. Do not do that, because those requests will probably get ignored. So really, really be very tactful. Find someone to intro you if you can, or search common groups. I can share strategies, but I know it's really tempting in this day and age to get any in you can, but I don't recommend it.
Yes, I agree. And I think that you take for granted, because at least in my school where I taught, it was only 200 people and everybody knew everyone. So when opportunities came around for people to apply to jobs, it was like everybody had a kind of say in that role. And so if you connected to a random science teacher, even if it was an English teacher, eventually it was going to get back, and that was going to have some weight. And I don't always find that in the corporate world. Sometimes, but not often. Congratulations, Gina, on your position in higher ed. That is great. I am very happy that you're happy, and it's great to see people being successful outside of the classroom. Jackie asked, are there certain portfolio artifacts or topics you look for when choosing between candidates? This is a great question. Truthfully, it's hard. It's very job dependent. If we're looking for a senior instructional designer, we are going to be looking for a detailed portfolio in a authoring tool that we use, and we would want people to have that high level of experience. If I'm looking for an instructional designer, then I'm going to be looking for a lot of different things. So I would recommend you focus for kind of artifacts if you would like to create a portfolio, maybe doing something in Storyline and maybe doing a job aid, but really focusing in my opinion, not on your ability to use the tool, but on your ability to teach the content, because that's what you're bringing to the table here. You have been teaching content ever since you began teaching, and you have been advocating for learners, and you have been going through that process. And like I said earlier, I can teach you how to use Storyline. I can't teach you how to be an advocate for that learner. So focus on making sure that whatever portfolio artifacts or whatever topics you talk about, they're authentic to yourself. Really showcase the skills that you're already bringing to the table, not the skills that you're learning through YouTube, because that's great, but I want to know what you're already really good at. Does that make sense? All right. Yes. A lot of organizations do request a portfolio, and it can be hard, and look at other portfolios to gain ideas to begin building. I would agree. So along with Christy Tucker, there's also the career teacher transition coach. She was great, and there's a lot of podcasts and things like that that are helpful, if anything, just to inspire you. And connecting, like I said, with me, I will absolutely help you. I will go through your resume. We can have another call. So look for those connections, and maybe even people in here would be open to connecting and sharing ideas. If you are, feel free to put it in the chat, because those are some more even genuine connections than just the the influencers, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, on LinkedIn, who are sharing all their resources. Yeah, and Anna did say that networking is a long game and takes time, and that is very, very true. I'm not the best at that, at posting on LinkedIn, except for when I have something to share, which isn't that often. But if you message me, I will pay attention to that, I promise. You guys are also doing it here by being a part of this conference and interacting with people that are already in the field. So I commend you for that. Awesome. See some people willing to connect and other resources. Awesome. Yes, teacher transition coach. That's exactly what I was saying, Jackie. Absolutely. I was on her podcast, I think, right after I transitioned. She is an awesome, and she has grown her following to a lot. And I never paid for any of her resources, but I did listen to her podcast, and I did use all of her free resources, and they were really helpful. So awesome. All right. Well, I just want to say once again, thank you guys. I look forward to connecting with you, and best of luck. I hope you got something out of this presentation, and I wish you well. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Megan. We really appreciate you being here and kind of sharing your insights. It's always so helpful to hear from people who've done it. It's hopeful, and like, okay, if you did it, I can do it. And I think those of us that have moved from the classroom know that the community out here is super strong for those of us who have transitioned. So find your community. There's tons there. I'm sure you know of communities. I've done a lot of research in this. I'm happy to connect as well. Find your people. Keep learning. It is a little like drinking from a fire hose, for lack of a better word. There's lots to learn, lots to know, and a huge adjustment to see how the business world works, for sure. So think of it like you're building a PEP for a student, right? Break down your learning plan and take it in chunks so that you don't feel like it's big and overwhelming, because a transition takes time. It's not going to happen in 2 months. It's going to be 6 to 12 months probably. I used to support career switchers that were going into tech reskilling programs. It takes quite a while to be able to build what you need to build and reskill, and don't lose hope, because it's going to happen. You're going to find your spot. You just have to give yourself a chance and understand your learning, and that's what it's all about. We're here to support you.
We are. Thanks, guys.
Are you able to share your presentation? Do you have a?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
I can put it in the chat. I just need to get the Canva link. Now you see the presentation. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sure. How do I stop sharing my screen? Oh, there we go. Oh, the tech worked for me until the last second. There we go. All right, so I think that should work.
Oh, perfect.
And anyone with the link should be able to view it. And if not,
I'm going to go ahead and copy this into our event feed so it doesn't get lost here.
yes.
That's perfect. Yeah, we definitely appreciate you taking some time out of your day and sharing with us and being a part of this event. It's always wonderful to provide those stories of inspiration for the next generation of teacher transitioners. Yes, we are. We are taking over the workforce for sure, and more than just teaching. It's true. It's true. Did anyone have a last minute question or a thought as we kind of wrap up? I didn't see that the question and answer was kind of empty, so I didn't know if anyone had a kind of a final thought or a question they wanted to add into the chat. Or just kind of intaking all the information. Oh, perfect, Brenda. That's awesome. Also, another connection request. Lots of interview experience there. That'd be a great one to connect with Brenda and find out, get some insights. All right, I think we're kind of winding down here. Megan has kindly offered her connection information on LinkedIn, so definitely be sure and reach out. We have about an hour to kind of digest materials before we're coming back into the next session here let me see here, I got to do a quick time change in my head. So that'll be at 1:00, and I'll actually be hosting that one with a former colleague, Emily, who's going to talk about kind of diagnosing your job search. So catch us live at 12 p.m. Pacific time, or what is that, 3 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll be chatting. So if anybody wants to connect, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to open up a table and continue the conversation. But otherwise, Angela and Megan, it was a pleasure having you here today, and thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to chat with us. Thank you. Have a good one. Good luck, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Maybe we'll catch you in the next session.